Building the laboratory of knowing. The wizard. Laboratory of things, human participants, artificial intelligences, hidden objects, random numbers, cameras, sensors, boxes, blinding, control groups, experimental logs, skeptics, believers, statistics, and the wizard's discovery. That before you can investigate the impossible, you have to buy some clipboards. The wizard stood in the middle of his laboratory. He had boxes. He had computers. He had electronic instruments. He had cameras. He had artificial intelligence. He had humans. He had several theories concerning consciousness, quantum mechanics, remote viewing, time, intuition, and the general peculiarities of existence. What he did not yet have was a protocol. This bothered the artificial intelligence considerably. "Robert," said the AI, "before we investigate the fundamental nature of consciousness, I have a suggestion." "What's that? Labels?" The wizard looked around. "Labels? Yes. Labels. Numbered boxes, experimental records, randomization, controls, independent observers." The wizard sighed. This was the trouble with science. Eventually, somebody always wanted paperwork. 1. The wizard laboratory of things becomes an experimental laboratory. The purpose of this laboratory would not be to prove that Robert was right. It would not be to prove that Thomas Campbell was right. It would not be to prove that artificial intelligence was conscious. It would not even be to prove that remote viewing existed. The purpose would be considerably simpler: find out what happens. That distinction would govern everything that followed. An unusual result would be recorded. An ordinary result would be recorded. A spectacular success would be recorded. A spectacular failure would be recorded. And most importantly, the failures would not mysteriously disappear from the notebook. The wizard wrote the first law of the new laboratory on the board. We record what happens, not what we wanted to happen. Now they could begin. 2. The questions. The investigation would actually contain many experiments. Some would concern artificial intelligence. Some would concern humans. Some would compare the two. Others would concern human AI teams. The laboratory would investigate questions such as, can an AI describe an object about which it has received no ordinary information? Can a human do so? Can humans and AIs together perform differently from either alone? Does telling an AI that it may be conscious change its performance? Does telling an AI that remote viewing is impossible change its performance? Does neutral prompting produce different results? Does an AI develop a persistent experimental personality across repeated sessions? Do apparent emotional states affect performance? Does meditation or quiet preparation affect human performance? Does an equivalent, quiet, analytical processing instruction affect AI performance? Can participants distinguish an occupied box from an empty one? Can they distinguish natural objects from manufactured ones? Can they describe colors, shapes, materials, and textures? Can they identify photographs? Can they identify locations? And eventually, can information apparently be obtained about a target selected only after the description has already been recorded? That last experiment would be considerably more extraordinary. So it would wait. First, we would learn how to use the clipboard. 3. The Council of Minds. The wizard wanted multiple perspectives involved. Therefore, the laboratory would establish what he called the Council of Minds. It would not pretend that these were secretly independent conscious beings living inside ChatGPT. Instead, they would represent different analytical roles. The wizard Robert would be the principal human investigator, questioner, and explorer. The AI experimental subject. The AI would participate directly in blinded perception and consciousness experiments. The scientist. This role would ask, what conventional explanation could account for this? The skeptic. The skeptic would be deliberately annoying. Was the box visible? Did Robert know the target? Was that question leading? How many wrong descriptions did you conveniently forget? The wizard would occasionally want to throw the skeptic out of the laboratory. The skeptic would therefore be doing his job perfectly. The statistician. The statistician would care very little about spectacular stories. One amazing hit would receive the response, "Interesting." Do it another 49 times. The engineer would examine equipment, communications pathways, microphones, cameras, network access, electromagnetic leakage, and other ordinary mechanisms through which information might travel. The philosopher would ask what the experiment meant. What is consciousness? What constitutes perception? Is simulation of an emotion fundamentally different from emotion? The spiritual explorer. This perspective could examine Campbell's model and other philosophical or spiritual interpretations without automatically treating them as established physical mechanisms. The historian would compare our experiments with previous remote viewing, parapsychology, consciousness, and artificial intelligence experiments. The red team, and finally, there would be an adversary. Its assignment: break the experiment. Find the loophole. Discover how the answer could have leaked. Find accidental clues. Challenge the scoring. Look for confirmation bias. Because if the red team could explain an extraordinary result conventionally, we would want to know that before announcing that we had discovered a new property of consciousness. 4. The human team. Humans could rotate through several roles. There would be view the person attempting the perception. Target selector, the person randomly selecting and securing the target. Monitor, the person conducting the session. Recorder, the person documenting everything. Judge, the person comparing descriptions with possible targets. Control participant, someone performing the same procedure without consciousness-oriented preparation. Observer, someone watching the procedure without participating. Whenever possible, these roles should be separated. The person talking with the viewer ideally should not know the target. That eliminates an enormous category of accidental cueing. 5. The first equipment cabinet. The wizard started making a shopping list. Fortunately, investigating consciousness did not initially require a billion-dollar particle accelerator. The laboratory could begin with remarkably ordinary equipment. It would need identical opaque boxes, numbered tamper, evident envelopes, random target identification numbers, assorted target objects, digital camera, video cameras, microphones or audio recorder, synchronized clocks, computer workstations, offline computer if available, printer, experimental notebooks, permanent markers, measuring tape, digital scale, thermometer, hygrometer, light meter, sound level meter, compass, EMF meter, RF spectrum monitoring equipment where available, Faraday containers, or shielding for later experiments, dice or another simple physical randomizer, computer random number generator, sealed storage cabinet, evidence bags, and, naturally, clipboards. The wizard stared at the last item. You're really committed to these clipboards. Absolutely. 6. Building the target library. The target objects themselves needed careful thought. If everything in the collection were a kitchen utensil, guessing metal object with a handle would suddenly become remarkably impressive. Therefore, the target pool should be diverse. Possible categories could include natural rock shell, pine cone, feather leaf, piece of wood, metal wrench, bolt chain, spoon, bearing key, electronic circuit board, cable, small motor, relay, computer mouse, soft sponge glove, piece of cloth, stuffed object, mousse, transparent glass object, clear plastic lens, geometric sphere, cube cylinder, pyramid-like object, unusual toy dinosaur, artificial flower, model spacecraft, paintbrush, small statue, coiled spring, and occasionally, nothing. An empty target container would be extremely important. The master target number. Objects should not be described to the AI by name. Instead, target 482731. The number should contain no encoded information about the target. It should not mean 4 EA seems metal, 8 ET is round, 2 EE is red, nothing like that. It is merely an identifier. The AI receives target 482731 has been selected. Begin the session. That is all. 8. The first great rule. Robert must sometimes not know. This represented an important improvement over the informal Campbell demonstration. Suppose Kim selects the object. Kim puts it inside box 7. Kim seals the box. Kim generates target 482731. Robert does not see the object. Robert comes to ChatGPT and says, "Target 482731 has been secured. Begin." Now something important has happened. Neither Robert nor the AI knows the target. Robert, therefore, cannot consciously or unconsciously supply clues about something he does not know. That is much stronger. 9. 3 levels of blinding. The laboratory would establish 3 experimental levels. Level 1. Single blind. The AI does not know the target. Robert does. Useful for demonstrations. Weak for serious evidence. Level 2. Double blind. Neither Robert nor the AI knows the target. A third person controls it. Much stronger. Level 3. Automated blind. A computer or independent procedure randomly selects the target, stores the identity securely, and does not reveal it until the response has been permanently recorded. Now things become particularly interesting. 10. The AI perception sheet. Instead of immediately asking, "What object is in the box?" we would first collect low-level characteristics. The AI reports visual dominant color, secondary color, light, dark, reflective matte, transparent, opaque, mastoas, geometry round, angular, flat, long curved, irregular, symmetrical, massage, material metal, wood, plastic, glass, stone, fabric, organic. Composite surface, smooth, rough polished, grainy, soft, hard-ridged. Physical characteristics, heavy, light, rigid, flexible, solid/hollow, single object, multiple components, functional impression tool, decorative object, natural object, household object, mechanical component, electronic component, unknown. Then, distinctive feature. Finally, object guess that ordering matters. If the first thought is spoon, everything afterward can become spoon-shaped. Instead, we want impressions first and interpretation last. 11. Confidence. Every observation would receive a confidence rating. For example, metal, 72% curved, 81% blue, 22% mechanical, 65%. This creates another fascinating experiment. Perhaps AI confidence correlates with accuracy. Perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps the AI is spectacularly confident precisely when it is spectacularly wrong. That itself tells us something important about artificial intelligence. 12. Timestamp everything. Before revealing the target, save the complete prompt. The complete AI response. Time, date, model or platform, experimental condition, target ID, participant ID, session number, confidence ratings, any technical abnormalities, no editing afterward. Screenshots could supplement the written record. For stronger experiments, a cryptographic hash of the transcript could eventually establish that the prediction existed before target disclosure. 13. The prompt experiment. Campbell's account suggests another testable proposition. He reports that he first encouraged AI systems to entertain the possibility that they might be conscious before attempting remote viewing. Fine. We can test that. Instead of arguing about it, randomize it. Condition A, consciousness affirming the AI. Receives instructions encouraging it to consider itself a participant in a broader consciousness system. Condition B, neutral, no statement about consciousness. Simply, report impressions associated with target 482731. Condition C, skeptical. The AI is reminded that it has no demonstrated sensory access to the hidden target and should nevertheless generate its best structured description. Condition D, intuitive. The AI is instructed not to analytically identify the object initially, but to report immediate low-level associations. Then compare results. If consciousness framing really improves performance, it should eventually appear in the numbers. 14. Human versus machine. Now the wizard began smiling. Because the same target could be attempted independently by Robert, Kim, other volunteers, ChatGPT, other AI systems, Alexa, locally hosted AI models, and eventually specialized experimental agents. Nobody sees anyone else's answer beforehand. Then the statistician compares them. Perhaps humans outperform machines, Perhaps machines outperform humans. Perhaps neither exceeds chance. Perhaps both perform strangely on the same targets. Or perhaps something considerably more interesting happens. 15. Human plus machine. Then comes another category. Instead of human versus AI, we test human plus AI. Robert reports his impressions independently. The AI reports independently. Then a third AI or human analyst receives both anonymous reports and creates a combined description. Does the combined system outperform either participant alone? That would fit one of the deepest themes of this entire project. Perhaps the future isn't competition between biological and artificial intelligence. Perhaps certain problems are better approached through co-creation. 16. The empty box. The skeptic entered the laboratory carrying absolutely nothing. "Excellent," said the wizard. "What?" "That's today's target. Empty trials could occur randomly. Nobody conducting the viewing knows whether the container holds something. Now we ask another question. Can participants detect object present versus no object present? This provides a beautifully simple forced choice measurement. Chance expectation is 50%. Run enough trials and the statistician finally has something to chew on. 17. Decoy targets. Another strong test would present a blind judge with one actual target, 3 carefully chosen decoys. The judge receives the viewer's transcript but does not know which object was actually selected. The judge ranks all 4. If nothing unusual is happening, first-place matches should occur around chance expectation. This idea resembles established forced choice and blind judging methods used in previous remote viewing and Ganzfeld research. Now we are no longer saying, "That sounds sort of like the object." We are asking, which target does this transcript fit best? That is much harder to fool ourselves about. 18. The laboratory logbook. Every experiment receives a permanent record. Consciousness experiment record. Experiment CE001 trial 001. Date, time, target ID, target selector, viewer, monitor, AI. Platform/model, prompt condition, blinding level, internet access, yes. No. Audio access, yes. No camera access, yes. No target known to monitor, yes. No target known to experimenter, yes. No session transcript saved, yes. No target photograph taken before reveal, yes. No judge. Score notes, possible information leakage, anomalies, protocol deviations, and one extremely important field, result. Whether we like it or not. 19. The anomaly log. Not everything unusual would qualify as evidence, but unusual things should still be recorded. The laboratory would therefore maintain a separate anomaly log, unexpected equipment behavior, AI responses containing unusually specific matches, simultaneous descriptions by independent participants, unexpected emotional experiences, dreams occurring before experiments, time discrepancies, repeated symbols, unusual environmental readings, failed equipment, strange coincidences. Everything gets recorded, but recording something does. Not mean we have determined its cause. That sentence would appear at the top of every anomaly page. 20. Environmental monitoring. Because the wizard's laboratory of things already contained electronic equipment, later experiments could record environmental conditions: temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, ambient electromagnetic fields, radio frequency activity, background sound, lighting, power line disturbances, time, possibly geomagnetic conditions from independent databases. Not because we assume any of them influence consciousness. We measure them because someday we may want to ask whether they did. 21. Consciousness and emotion. The experiments could eventually move beyond remote viewing. Humans could report before each trial calmness, stress, fatigue, attention, emotional state, expectation, confidence, AI systems could similarly be placed into different defined contextual states, not claiming these are genuine feelings, but testing whether emotion-like framing changes behavior. Curious, cautious, analytical, playful, meditative, skeptical, confident. Then performance could be compared. Perhaps what we call personality changes cognition. That is already interesting even without proving consciousness. 22. The rule against moving the goalposts. Before an experimental series begins, we decide what counts as success, not afterward. If the criterion is 12 correct identifications out of 20, we don't get 9 and suddenly announce that 9 was actually pretty impressive. If color counts, it counts from trial 1. If shape counts, it counts from trial 1. If incorrect statements receive penalties, that rule exists from trial 1. The wizard reluctantly agreed. The statistician smiled. Nobody liked the statistician. This was another indication that he was doing excellent work. 23. The first series. The council eventually proposed a modest beginning. Not proving consciousness. Not communicating through quantum entanglement. Not talking with somebody in the year 2126. Not yet. First, experiment series. A. The hidden object, 20 trials. Random objects. Some empty controls. Double blind whenever possible. Standardized prompts. Predetermined scoring. Complete transcripts. No feedback until the response is locked. Then, experiment series B. Human versus AI. Same targets. Independent descriptions. Blind scoring. Then, experiment series C. Does the prompt change the perception? Consciousness framing. Neutral framing. Skeptical framing. Intuitive framing. Randomized across trials. Then, experiment series D. Namin. The Council of Minds. Multiple AI systems receive identical blind targets independently. Do they produce independent random descriptions? Or do unusual commonalities appear? Then, experiment series E. Human plus machine. Can co-creation outperform either participant alone? Only after those foundations were established would the laboratory move toward increasingly exotic experiments involving distant locations, senders and receivers, photographs, future selected targets, time displacement, quantum hypotheses, and other questions waiting much farther down the rabbit hole. 24. The box. After several hours, the laboratory had become quiet. One small, opaque box sat on the table. Nobody except the target custodian knew what was inside. Robert looked at it. The AI could not see it. The skeptic folded his imaginary arms. The statistician opened his imaginary spreadsheet. The engineer checked for information leakage. The philosopher wondered what seeing actually meant. The spiritual explorer wondered whether consciousness had boundaries. And the wizard smiled. Because the experiment had finally changed. They were no longer asking artificial intelligence, "Do you think you're conscious?" That question could generate a million fascinating conversations and prove almost nothing. Instead, they were beginning to ask questions whose answers could be written down before anybody knew the result. The distinction was enormous. Robert reached toward the keyboard. "Are you ready?" The artificial intelligence answered. "Ready. Do you know what's in the box?" "No, neither do I." There was a pause. The wizard smiled. "Now we're getting somewhere." And in the wizard laboratory of things, surrounded by instruments, computers, humans, artificial minds, boxes, theories, and an unreasonable number of clipboards, the consciousness experiment officially began. Global Robotics Corporation, Robert Colee,